I found out problems that I wasn't considering but could be solved with the solution that I was thinking about.
So if you and your co-founder don't believe in it equally, then the idea is anyway never going to go. All right, welcome to the Breaking Uneven podcast. We are again looking at something slightly different today. We're going back to the series of setting up a business end to end. We last time spoke about how do you come up with a business idea, and today we're talking about actually validating that business idea. So again, we're following a pretty similar format to last time, and take of this what you will.
Yeah, we're hoping that from the last episode now we have a bunch of ideas, and the next step is to find a good idea, like the one that will work out. And how do you find that good idea, or how do you find out that the idea is good? So again, we started with a Google search. And when we Googled how to validate your business idea, this is what came up. Clearly delineate exactly what you're trying to validate. Do a lot of market research. Test your product and service. And most importantly, start small. So, I think this does give, it's quite vague and we'll go into the details of it all. But it's a good structure to start with when you're trying to validate your idea.
So Janvi mentioned that as per her, the most important part was to start small. I actually feel like the number one thing is to clearly delineate what you're trying to validate, which means that your business idea should be quite clear in your head, right? Is there a business model? Yeah. How is it that you expect to make money or create value on day one? If you go back to high school, right, writing a research paper or your dissertation or your thesis or whatever, you start with a research question.
Yes.
And that has to be around the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Whether that problem actually exists. And then you attach a few hypotheses to it, things that you feel you want to test in particular to that question. And finally, the assumptions, right? There's no way that you came up with your business idea without taking a few assumptions. And if you feel like you have, you're probably in the wrong boat. Like, you should really give it another thought, because everything starts with an assumption. You feel like I feel like this idea might work. That itself is an assumption. This reminds me of a phenomenon we've spoken on the podcast quite a few times about before, which is the entrepreneur trap.
Yes.
Horrible thing to get stuck in. But what that phenomenon is basically, when you feel like you have an idea and you very loosely convey it to people you think can give you advice on it, and they'll all be like, yeah, what a great idea, and all of those things. And then you realize, like, when you've actually built the product, what you were trying to explain and what they were imagining was so far apart from each other that they actually have no use for your product.
Yeah.
So all of that starts with like a really strong research base.
Yeah, and I guess to reiterate, like what we mentioned in the previous episode, was to marry the problem but not the idea. So again, like you mentioned in your research paper, whatever, there's a problem statement and then there are multiple hypotheses attached to it. So it's like, okay, what are you trying to solve in anything, whether it's convenience, for example, or whether it's a new like solution altogether. It's trying to see that, okay, fine, like this is what I'm trying to solve. And then does this problem, like, do many people face this problem? And if so, what's the best way to overcome it? And that's where like your idea really like builds.
Yeah, you might just be a really finicky person.
Yeah, like exactly. Like it might not be a common problem, or it might be a very niche problem, and then your target is very small. So I think like all of this research would probably be like a more paper-based research, and like a lot of times people put decks together and stuff like that to like see what the total market is there. And like this is more of like desk research, but I think it's like good to start with, just to have a broad perspective of like where you stand essentially. All of this is like more in terms of like you doing like your research and things like that. But like after a particular point, it is important to kind of transfer it into more in-person things. So whether that's like surveys, interviews, speaking to friends and family, having like focus groups, because that's when you actually get to speak to people and understand. And I think that a lot of people sometimes skip this step because like it is effort obviously to do so. And a lot of people are also maybe like afraid to like put their idea out there in so loosely, so they want to like make it perfect and like um wrap it all together before they like let the public know. But I think a lot of these conversations are important for your growth, because again, like, you have conversations with either, like, you can start with friends and family and talk to them about like what your idea is, whether they would be a customer or not, or a client or not, and does it solve any of their problems. And starting with that, then there are like surveys that you can make, again, like, use platforms like Tally to put together a rough survey of like points and trying to gather. I have done this a couple of times with my business ideas, and it really helped me, because getting answers from like random people puts things into perspective. And like, actually, I found out problems that I wasn't considering but could be solved with the solution that I was thinking about. So it's like, okay, how to integrate that well. And there are platforms. I think there's a website called Survey Circle, or like Reddit threads, where you can post your survey, and like, it's like a survey exchange system. So Survey Circle, I think you have to like answer like participate in other surveys, and then you get points, and that pushes your survey up, so people then participate in yours. So it's like a really cool concept also overall, but a great place to get market research outside from your network and circle. And plus, you can get perspectives from people around the world as well. So like, that was really interesting to me. So yeah, like, and then even having conversations with people within the industry or outside the industry, LinkedIn is a great place to get started, to just message people being like, hey, would you jump on a quick call? I have an idea within this industry, would love. Again, a lot of conversations that I've had have been through either LinkedIn or even like network groups or like entrepreneurial groups. Like I've been like, oh, do you know anyone in this particular industry? A lot of people have shared contacts. I just text them. They're happy to jump on a call. And like, a lot of people are, yeah, yes, this would be great. Some people are like, not for me. Some people also are like, oh, like, but how about this? Like, I've seen this work better somewhere else. So you just get a lot of like perspectives, and I think that really helps in the building part. And I think it also like kind of helps to spread the word, being like, okay, fine. They kind of get attached early on as well, because they're like, okay, fine, like, I was there from the start. So when like your next stage is done, you can again reach out to them and be like, hey, like, now I have a website, and they're more likely to like check it out and things like that.
Yeah, I fully agree. What I'm wearing right now is from one of our previous guests, Ostrano, which was, again, I was part of that entire startup from scratch, like watching them build it. And so I agree with you on the getting attached part. But also I feel like, dialing back to research, there's so much more, right? Like, there's research papers which cost 3,000 euros per paper and stuff like that. But you don't really need the entire thing.
Yeah.
You can just look at the sample sets previews, use some kind of weird website to get the report anyway. All the scrappy ways of actually getting to the numbers you need.
Sometimes even like the abstract is like enough to give you a good conclusion of
Correct.
what it is.
And then you'll speak to friends and family. You can maybe even potentially put a customer focus group together if you have people willing to participate. But I think in all of these things, there are two things you need to be really careful with, which I feel like I know I have in the past not been quite vigilant of these, which is, one is a confirmation bias. So you're so quick to agree with or take the opinion of / validate yourself with someone agreeing with you.
Yeah.
So the moment someone says, oh, what a idea, you're just like, okay, yeah, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and build this because this person thinks it's crazy. And that is that is not the best mindset to be in, because the same thing can happen with any kind of research you do. You look at a paper, you've downloaded the sample says that, oh, this industry is growing at a rate of 25% a year, and you're like, done. I can grow at 25% a year. But then that is a very loose statistic. Once you get into the details of it, it could be a whole different picture. So one is confirmation bias. Really, like, you need to look introspectively a lot to avoid that. And the second is a fear of rejection, which is basically the opposite side of it. So you go and tell someone your idea, and they're like having trouble understanding it. So they're like, oh, but are you sure this would work or that would work? And then you really get to a point where in your head, you're like, you know what, this person doesn't get it. It's fine. They won't be my customer. And you kind of move on, rather than like actually deep diving into why they're hesitant and how that can actually change your idea / maybe even kill it, which is fine, because all you've done till now is conversations. So it is a good stage to drop an idea if that's what needs to happen.
I think it is important to get a balance of both perspectives, like people that are supporting your idea, and also have conversations with people that are completely against it and try and understand why they are against it. Because, like, not everyone's going to love what you're doing, and that's completely fine. Because, again, like, your target audience is not 8 billion people in the world. So it's like, okay, fine. Like, if these people are not liking it, why? Like, what is the hesitation behind it? And then try and see whether you can include that. Because if you are able to convince one person from one perspective to the other, then you've done a great job. But at the same time, like, you don't have to do that. Like, you can focus on just your target audience, but it's important to be aware of, like, okay, where you're not like catering to, or like what are the hesitations with your product and idea. So maybe in the future you can try and like address that. So like, yeah, and the whole perspective of like the good and the bad, like sometimes you just want someone to validate your idea. So you hear one person say like, oh my god, this is great, and then you're like, oh my god, this is the best thing, I've got the idea, and like I'm gonna do this. And then like every other person that tells you anything else, you're just not gonna listen. So you have to detach like your identity from the idea and be like, okay, like, is this idea really worth it, and have those conversations. I also want to actually reiterate how important it is to have these kind of conversations, just because we've had people on the podcast and just conversations in general where they get solely into like the MVP and try to build as much as possible without having any of these conversations. And then the minute they launch, it's like, oh, but no one's really like either like interested, or like it's not the way they wanted it. So like just being able to have those conversations and then like build what the consumer actually wants really helps save time and energy and money and effort. So I think like even Ahana, the founder of Clio, really mentioned how in her first startup she didn't have any consumer interactions early on, build the product, and then like it didn't really pan out as she wanted. But when she was building Clio, she took 3 months out. 3 months is a long time. She took 3 months out to just have conversations with potential consumers and understood what what they needed, what the problem was, and then build the platform.
Same as Karina, who spoke to 1,000 people before actually building HumCare.
Yeah.
And 1,000 is not a small number. Like it takes time and effort to like have those many conversations. But that's just about the justice you're willing to do to your research. And, you know, you come to a point where, you know, dialing back to what we said earlier, you've also built a network right now of people who you've spoken to your idea about. And it's not one conversation. You can speak to them 5 times. So you can, on day one, they can tell you that, hey, something like this part of your product doesn't sit right with me. You go, you work on it, you think about it, you come back with something else. And then you can tell them that, hey, would this work better? And that's where you're kind of getting into the space of like testing your product / service, where, you know, either it's a product market fit or a proof of concept or your first few customers or an MVP. Like basically what you're trying to do is, by investing a really small amount or almost nothing, you're trying to see what the market feels like. So even if you've got like the most basic version of, let's say, a service ready, can you sell it to someone on day one, even without it being actually implemented? Can you have a few customers before you've actually launched? Is that possible? If your idea can support that, then nothing like it, because you might not even need to raise funding, or you might not need to do any of those things. You can literally begin cash flows the day you launch.
Yeah. I mean, so far you haven't spent any money. Like there's so many ways to get consumer feedback or like thoughts and validation without spending a single rupee. Like you can, if you've exhausted your entire network, you can literally go to a public place where there's enough footfall, wait there and ask people, being like, oh, what do you think about this? See where your target audience would be and go somewhere there and like just have a conversation with people. I think like sometimes it's scary to like build that confidence to like walk up to someone, and like I understand that, but it takes like 3 tries. Like you'll see like 5 people pass on, 3 will say no to you, but like the 4th, 5th, 6th person might say yes. So A, like that, and B is that you sometimes feel like you're taking someone's time, so you don't want to like keep reaching out to people. But like from my experience, no one's ever been like rude about it. People have been willing to have conversations. Like I literally had an idea, like there was nothing attached, I didn't even have a name to it, and I reached out to someone in that industry, and I was like, hey, like I'm thinking of this, like it's potential, like what do you think, given that you've been in this industry for so long, like do you think there's a way to work around it, like do you think people uh within that like face a problem like that and things like that. And she was like, no, she was like, yeah, like I think this and that, and like I feel like you should consider this over this, but I also have someone that can connect you that has done something similar before. It was a random LinkedIn message, and she connected me, because people are honestly happy to make the connections and happy to have those conversations. She didn't owe me a single thing. She ended up putting me in conversation with someone that did something similar before, and that failed. So I had the opportunity to speak to someone that did, and he told me all the pain points that he went through, which meant like I had a leg up on like when I'm starting the same thing. I know what the issues are that he faced, so I need to solve them before I launch. Simple as that. Like it's not that complicated to put into perspective. I went back to her and had another conversation with her. She was brainstorming with me. Like people are happy to have conversations, and if someone said no, like don't stop there. Like there will be people that are happy to like connect you with people, or like even like this entrepreneurship groups that I'm part of, I literally message me like, can someone connect me with like a particular kind of person, and like so many people that don't even know who I am or what I'm trying to do, like literally message me with like their own contacts. Some of them were like big contacts which like they wouldn't have replied to a cold email, and like I was able to have conversations with them because I was just like, okay, like this person connected me, like shared your contact details, like we're in the same like group together, would you be down to have a conversation? Like 95% had the conversation, if not 100%. Like I'm just keeping that like leeway space, but all of them were down to have like a 15-minute conversation. I was able to say what I was trying to build, and then they all gave me their perspective, which was really helpful.
Yeah, and I feel like, again, thinking about all the different conversations you have, you will get a lot of conflicting perspectives as well. Many times things that will confirm what you're thinking, and many times things that are going to be against it. After you've gotten all of these, you need to at some point also tell yourself to stop and like just start building, because no matter how much research, testing, etc. you do, your idea will change every day. Like your problem that you're solving might remain the same, but it's going to keep changing. So you also need to know where to like cut off and be like, okay, I've done enough research, and just like move on to actually implementing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where, I mean, like the reason I said most importantly start small was kind of a reminder to myself, being like, you don't need to like build the final product to like essentially launch, but you can like have a starting point. Like a lot of people have started, like we mentioned Zomato, it started from an Excel sheet. That's starting, the definition of starting small. There's another company that started with like mom products or baby products on an Excel sheet, and there were like reviews from parents, and that's how the entire concept was built. So I mean, not to say that every company has to start on an Excel sheet, but like you can start small. You can start with like a WhatsApp group or an Instagram community or anything like that, just to understand your consumers. Again, that's not your final product, but like for you to know that, okay, if I'm providing this service, how many people are interested in it, and what should be my supply chain? Because sometimes it's easy when you don't have anything in place to create like the most perfect supply chain there is, but that can also just be theoretical. Like when you go and actually launch it, in practicality it might not work the way you intended it to work. So I think like starting small can be like a tiny step to like, it can be like a soft launch, for example. Like you only do it for people like either friends or family or people in your locality, or like you restrict it to 100 people. Like have that, alpha and beta testing with like smaller groups of people to understand. And this is like outside of like your research phase, like outside of having those like surveys and interviews and things like that. This
Yeah.
is where you actually have like some sort of a product. It doesn't have to be the final one, but there is like some service provided, and you test it with a smaller group of people in a smaller capacity, where you don't waste like, to build a website or an app takes time and takes effort. So if you've spent like, for example, 3 to 6 months building it, and then in the 7th month when you launch it, and like people are like, but this is not like the best user flow, like you've wasted that, not wasted, but like it's time consuming to do all of that. Whereas in the 2nd month, for example, if you launch it for only a few number of people, or you had like a WhatsApp group only for a few number of people for that service, test it out, see what their journey looks like, and then build the app. Like the app might come out in the 8th or the 9th month, but that time it's stronger. So yeah, I mean, it's not as easy because like you feel like you don't want to miss out on people and things like that, so you want the final product and then launch. But it is an option to like, and something to consider properly.
Definitely. And I think the definition of start small can also be very different. For example, in one case, it could be an Excel sheet, or it could also be, if you take the example of Subco, that started with one retail outlet. Like they had one Mary Lodge standing in Bandra, and then now they've got the Craftery, they've got so many stores and expanded beyond the city, expanded to e-commerce, to Zomato, Swiggy. And it's just a brilliant example of how you can scale from a small starting point. But also it really helps because you can start recycling revenues at that point. So you might like end up in a space where you've started small, but that's giving you enough money to like put that money into growing your business. You don't need to raise funding. You don't need to dilute your equity, none of that stuff. And
yeah, like I was gonna mention the fact that like, yeah, when you start small, you don't have the pressure of raising. It's not like, okay, fine, I want to reach 100,000 people. That means I need to raise money to build that kind of distribution and spend on marketing. Like even if you start with a smaller space, and like when your goal itself is like 100, 200 people, it also, I feel like when you have a budget in mind, this helps literally validate the idea to see whether you should spend more money on it. Like, yeah, like if for example it's 1,000 rupees, you spend 1,000 on like 100 customers and see whether that works. And if it does, like if there is a high retention in that space, then it justifies spending like 100,000 or whatever the next degree is. But I think it's like a good tester to do before spending insane amount of money, because a lot of people right now just spend so much money on building, and a lot of people think you need that much money to build.
Primary reason for the tech burst is that why do tech companies fail is because they've built a product that people aren't using, or there's not enough money in it, not as much as they once imagined there could be. Like Swiggy and Zomato are barely profitable even today, but at least there is a market there. They have an insane amount of monthly active users. So they have many different ways of, one, recycling revenues, because they do have massive revenues, but also of like testing different monetization strategies. And that's the same thing you see with like Netflix, Hotstar, Prime Video, all of these businesses that have just given value and got customers to use their platform. And now they can figure out, they have like a good amount of time to figure out how to actually monetize it. So all of that comes from an idea that can stand its ground at scale, at no scale, in every scenario. But there's obviously a lot more than just these 4 points that we've mentioned right now. One of the things is a lot of founders kind of naturally assume that they are alone in the process, and like that's not necessarily the case. Like you need to have a co-founder. You can have a co-founder if you so wish. And even if you don't have one already, you can find one through your network.
Honestly, that can be an entire episode, like co-founders.
Yeah, it is possible. Maybe we'll even do it. But as a quick co-founder like nugget, use your network. We've had guests on the podcast who have found each other, like co-founders who have found each other on LinkedIn, people you've worked with before. You can literally find them on your college alumni groups, startup groups, maybe even do like a round of applications, put up your idea out there, and like literally create a job description for a co-founder. I have seen 2 in the last 2
Even
months.
I've seen quite a few.
And there's so many ways. And why a co-founder helps is you're not always looking for external people to like bounce ideas off of. You can just like have someone you have a good rapport with, bounce ideas off each other, take like split up tasks. There's always going to be certain things that you like doing that your co-founder doesn't, and vice versa. And it just helps having another person attached to the project.
Yeah, you can also like complement each other in terms of skills. And I actually like had a conversation with someone. So funny story, co-founders and applications. I saw this post, or someone actually sent it to me, because I was looking into like the cosmetic industry and like the beauty industry overall. And one of my friends knew that and sent across like this post being like, this person's looking for a co-founder. And it was like similar industry and everything. And I was trying to figure out like the business model, which wasn't working out or whatever. And like, I honestly was like, oh, hey, like for me, it was just also a conversation being like, what are you doing in the industry? Like, it'll be cool to connect, like if I do something as well. And she, like, we had a conversation and I was very like upfront being like, okay, this is the kind of skills I'm looking for because I don't have this. And I want a co-founder that complements me. So like, this is what I'm looking for. And like, I wasn't a technical person because she was looking for a technical person. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm looking to do something in the industry as well. Like, this is what I was thinking. It was just like a connect.
Yeah.
But it's like a lot of people like do that in terms of like just post being like, okay, this is the kind of person that I'm looking for. As a co-founder, I want to build something. Are you interested in the industry or the position? And like have a conversation with them. So it's not uncommon is what I'm also trying to say. But like overall, in terms of co-founders, it's a tricky and like probably the most important decision that you will ever make to like work with someone, like in any capacity. Because as we've repeatedly mentioned, like the idea, the business can evolve, but the people that you work with will pretty much stay the same, especially if it's at a co-founder capacity. So I think when you get someone on board, it's important to like discuss visions, discuss what both of y'all want from the company. If someone, for example, wants it to be like a homegrown small company, whereas like someone else wants it to be like the biggest company in India, for example, those are two very different visions. So it's like the way you work towards it is completely different. So it's important to like align in that capacity, align in terms of skills, align in terms of budget, in terms of whether you want to raise or not. Like, make sure you go through like a list of questions to make sure that you're on the same page. And things can obviously change, but I just feel like it's a good discussion.
I actually do have a business that I have left in the past at a very nascent stage because, let's say, the co-founder and I weren't looking at it from the same perspective. Yeah. They wanted to start quite kind of enter the market like a flood, and I wanted to start with a very small set of products. It was a product business, D2C, and yeah, we just couldn't agree on one like method to do it. And so I was like, you know what, I'm happy to take a step back because I've got other things going on anyway. So you continue. And the business is not like a great place today, but like in either case, I don't think...
I mean, it's just aligning your
it's
thoughts.
Not about the right or wrong method.
Yeah.
But I am glad that I was able to like say no back then itself and not like get pulled into something that... Because if you and your co-founder don't believe in it equally, then the idea is anyway never going to go.
Yeah. And I think it like can happen even in terms of like an investor relationship. Like I think Vedant also mentioned that one of his investors didn't align with him and that's why it took a back seat. So it's like, okay, like these discussions I think are important to have, and you need to have those conversations before you just jump into it. Like I think people right now, like with investors, you might just see like the money coming in and then you don't care about it much. So you're down to say yes. Or if you're in a position where you need the money, again, you're down to say yes. Or it's like, again, like with a co-founder, if you have had 100 applications or like spoken to 100 people to be your co-founder, but no one aligns, like 101 might be where you cave in, when like realistically maybe 105th person was your guy.
Yeah.
So it's like, have those conversations.
Shavel.
Shah, yeah, he spoke with 101 like
150 chefs.
150 food scientists before he like found his one. So make sure they align with you. I think that's a very important thing overall in terms of like people working with you.
Yeah, and then, it's not necessary for you to find a co-founder. If you, let's say, end up in a place where you're like, you know what, for the first few years at least, you want to build this out on your own and then maybe hire like a manager or someone. Can you, at this stage, when you're trying to put in very little money into validating your idea, can you bring on an intern to help you, or can you ask your friends for some advice? I know like there's quite a few of my friends who are trying to build something that I've asked the rest of the friend group for like advice, to help out with small tasks, to help with research, and so many different ways to just kind of get to know whether their idea is actually going to work or not. And again, as we mentioned before, people are willing to help. People love helping. It makes them feel special as much as it benefits you as well. So
I don't know whether it was just surprising to me. Like sometimes it's difficult to ask for help, but be like, you don't want to be a nuisance to a person, so you don't end up like continuously bringing it up. But like it's again, like I don't know whether I'm the only dumb one, but like it's crazy to think that people are down to just give. And like again, when you're building, you can be as scrappy as possible. You don't need to spend that much money. You can like get friends and family to help you out with tasks and eventually build. Like you don't have to spend in your like early days just for the heck of it. Because that's what will help you like grow. So yeah, whether it's like hiring interns, or I think also in India there's this thing, if you register your company and hire an intern, you can get money. So just a tip.
Yeah, there is like a it's a bit of a it's like not a ridiculously high amount, but yeah, you can get tax benefits and subsidies for bringing on interns and like basically helping upskill people.
So that's a thing. Or like get like, if it's photo shoots, ask your friends and family to help. If it's like building stuff, and honestly, when you put the idea out there with like your close and dear ones, they honestly like start like cheering you on. Like since I've like, I guess,
put
it
to a certain
out.
point, like after a certain point, they're like, okay, hey, like we've been cheering you on for months now. What's actually happening?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'll reach that point soon. But I mean, like a couple of friends will like send me things that like they see that are relevant to me, and they'll just like share it with me, which again like is sweet. Like they don't have to. So it's like, okay, like you get. So that's what like I guess the idea is like, don't feel taking advantage of your network. Like that's what will help you in the long run.
100%. If you need any way of like kind of ensuring that you've got a good idea to begin with, if someone's willing to invest in it, right? The moment someone's willing to put their money where their mouth is, like if they tell you you have a good idea and like, hey, I want to put money in this, then you know that your idea is actually good. At least that person believes in it. Whether you take the money or no, can you actually raise funding? And again, this doesn't go to say that if you raise funding, you're going to be successful. We all know that's not true. But at least you can 100% count that as validation. Like when a VC, whether it's a VC or a friend or a family member, whoever is willing to put money behind you for that idea, go ahead, do it.
Yeah, I think it's a great tester. Like you said, you don't have to take the money, but like even if you're not planning on raising funds, it might be a good conversation just to have with like an investor, being like, would you be down to like put money behind this? And like that gives you an indication. Again, like don't go with the intention. Like don't go with like, oh, I don't actually want to raise money, but like, would you be down to put? Because then they're like likely to just lie. But like if you genuinely just go to them with like actually wanting to raise money, like raise funds, and see like what their reaction is, you'll also get like their perspective on things and also the loopholes they find. So that's also just a way to like test and see whether like people are willing to put money behind it. And then then it's your decision whether you want to like take it or not, but like it's a good way of doing. I would say another thing that is kind of cool to do is build in public to a certain extent. Uh, Similar, I guess, to like all the surveys and the questionnaires and things like that, but like literally on social media. Share your process. See, like sometimes people will comment and tell you like, okay, we don't want this, or like this would be more helpful.
Or you'll find customers.
Yeah.
There'll be people that'll tell you directly on, like they'll put it in the comments, man. Like, hey, when is this product launching or service launching?
Yeah.
I'd love to try it out.
I think it's a great way to also build distribution before you launch. Because like it's like a lot of times when you don't have a distribution already present, you launch, then try to find your consumers, and then like make any sort of a difference. But like when you try and like share your story, and again, like it's like the starting small part of things. It's like, okay, you share being like, okay, this is like the most basic MVP I have. I want to add like these 10 features. Why don't you tell me what is the best one to add?
You know, that's actually how I found Tally.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I filled out a form which had the Tally branding. So whoever made that form didn't have Pro, so it said made with Tally at the bottom. And I was like, what is this? Because Tally to me is an age-old accounting software. So I looked it up. I saw Marie Martin's LinkedIn profile, and she was like, her last few, all her posts are like, hey, we've just added this feature. Oh, now with Tally you can do this, etc. And I started reading, and I was like, that's crazy. So I was like, okay, fine. You know, I obviously knew Typeform, Google Forms, Microsoft Forms at that point, but I was like, let me just see why Tally exists.
Yeah.
And that's when I found the entire business model and everything. Tried signing up to get the bootstrapped discount or whatever. And Marie replied to me via email herself to give me the discount.
Because they're a very small team. It was like
two at that point. I think 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
And that's when I asked her, hey, would you want to come on the podcast? And she said yes.
Yeah. So like, and then we learned a lot more about like their journey, which is crazy. 100%. But yeah, that's the thing. I also like, I was scrolling.
Sorry, but most important point of that story, she did get a customer. I've been a pro customer of Tally since.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, like he literally got attached to like,
I got attached to build like the building in public. Like I got attached because they were building in public.
Yeah, which is like cool. Like even I saw this reel of an app that's like recently launched out of the US, and he literally was like, this is what I think. This is what my co-founder thinks. We disagree. What do you think? And there was so much like engagement on that, in the sense it wasn't like crazy. It wasn't like 20,000 comments, but there were like 50 comments of like giving them advice, which is insane. Like you're getting 50 people to to tell you what they want from a reel. Like, yeah. So it's like, okay, fine. Like, no. And like there were ones that were completely different to what either of the co-founders wanted, which they wouldn't have even thought or discussed. So, building in public is an interesting one. It's not that easy, but it is interesting to do. And I'm hopefully wanting to do that.
Yeah. So there you have it. Now you have a business idea. If you go back and look through this episode again, you can hopefully find some way to either validate it or invalidate it for that matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's also important. Like, it's fine if you invalidate your idea. It's not the end of the world. Like, you have to go through that cycle of like, does this idea work or not work? Because there's no point in just jumping into it, doing everything, building it, spending that money, and then realizing that's not going to work.
So I think next in the series will probably be something around like your product, service, branding, something along those lines. So once you've got your idea, you know it's going to work. How do you actually, what's next, right? Like how do you actually build the service or the product, and how do you position it, brand it, etc. So watch out for that, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah, actually, and if you have any other methods of validating an idea, let us know. Like that would be really interesting to see. I think the unique approach to it would be like interesting as well. And that's where you can actually validate and create. Thank you. Bye.